We're going to go ahead and call the meeting of the City of Bloomington City Council to order. If everyone would stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, and please remain standing for a moment of silence. Thank you. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Alderman Mathey,
Here.
Alderman Sage,
Here.
Alderman Malumway, Alderman Burgess, Alderman Painter, here, Alderman Schmidt, Alderman Black, here, Alderman Hallman, here, Alderman Bray, here, Mayor Renner.
Here. Thank you very much. We do have a quorum. We're going to go ahead and start with recognitions and appointments. We have a proclamation for declaring the 175th anniversary. That is correct, 175th anniversary of the Wayman African Methodist Church. Is there someone already in line to accept this? Please come forward. And if you want to say a few words afterwards, I'll do that. Good to see you. Congratulations. Good to see you. Proclamation 175th Wayman African Methodist Episcopal Church. Whereas Wayman African Methodist Episcopal Church was established on October 21, 1843 by Reverend Paul Quinn, Moses Bird, a gravedigger, Joseph Hobson, a man of means, and James Hill, who cooperated a barber shop, founded the African Methodist Education Society and Church. And whereas at 804 North Center Street, ground was broken for the church building. In 1990, Reverend Robert E. Harvey brought vision, insight, and energy to the church. His vision led him to encourage the congregation to relocate from 804 Center Street, the original home, to the current building at 803 West Olive in Bloomington, Illinois. And whereas on September 11, 2016, history was made when Bishop John Franklin White, Bishop of the 4th Episcopal District, assigned the first female pastor to Wayman AME Church, Reverend Dr. Bridget A. Black, standing right in front of me. And whereas Wayman African Methodist Episcopal Church has provided religious, educational, and recreational support and programming for children and adults in Bloomington for 175 years. And whereas Wayman African Methodist Episcopal Church is one of the oldest churches still in existence in McLean County today and supports many ministries in the community, and its 65 plus members continue to honor and praise God. Now, therefore, I urge the Bloomington community to acknowledge the importance of Wayman African Methodist Episcopal Church it has on its members and contributions that it has made by dedicated individuals in helping to preserve the heritage that has helped to shape the lives of the community. Therefore, I, Terry Renner, Mayor of the City of Bloomington, do by here proclaim October 21st, 2018 as Wayman African Methodist Episcopal Church Day, dated this 8th day of October 2018. Thank you so much and congratulations. Thanks. Would you like to say a few words?
On a jubilant journey and will continue to serve God and the people of Bloomington, Illinois and the greater McLean County. Wayman African Methodist Episcopal Church was founded as African Methodist Education Society and Church. It was organized on October 10, 1843 by Reverend William Paul Quinn, Moses Bird, Joseph Hobson, and J.W. Hill, because of the pressing need for religion and education among the Negroes of McLean County. Although the name was later changed, its need did not. We have maintained a ministry presence and weathered the changes of life for 175 years. We've come this far by faith and strength in God, the sheer tenacity of the people of God. We thank you for this proclamation honoring the ministry of Wayman African Methodist Episcopal Church on this evening, October 8th, 2018.
Thank you very much. I'd also like to note the extremely important role in the American Civil Rights Movement that AME churches throughout the United States, particularly in the South, had played in helping us as Americans form a more perfect union. And again, congratulations. Next, I'd like to move to item 5B, the presentation of the winners of the 2018 Beautification Awards as presented by the Beautification Committee. And I'm going to be turning it over to Robin, who's, I can tell, is on her way up with assistance. If you could introduce yourselves, please, just for the record.
I'm Robin Vandermay, the chair of the Citizens Beautification Committee, and Dan Freeberg is the assistant chair, and he will be helping to hand out these nice, heavy awards.
Okay, thank you, Dan, and thank you, Robin.
And we do have a PowerPoint to show you.
Okay,
Are you going to come down and shake hands?
I will do that. I will do what you tell me to do, Robin.
I know that the council members have heard before, but the beautification every year takes nominations from the public and city council, and then we do a drive around and all the members vote, and then we collate those votes, and the houses or businesses that come out on top, we present an award. And these are the homes and the businesses that stand out on a block. It's the one that you might do a little double take as you drive by because it looks nice. With that, I'm going to get started. Our first award winner is Ronald and Mary Anderson.
Who's taking pictures there?
Oh, thanks.
There we go.
Okay. These are some of the pictures of their home at 1311 Seminary, West Seminary.
Oh, that's good. Wow.
They feel a little damp because they were in the back of my truck. Okay, I guess we have to hurry now because it's going without me. He's not going to help me.
Go back or right click and hit pause show.
Okay. The next winner is Jane Jones from Hershey Drive.
Judy John?
She was so excited about
I'll
this,
hold
too.
it up for her.
Is she here?
Let's see. And that's at 104, excuse me, 105 North Hershey.
Yes. And then we have Josefina Ramirez from 1202 West MacArthur. And this isn't just the garden, it's everything that stands out from the way the porch is painted to the display of flowers.
Okay. Is Christina Ramirez?
Okay, we're going to move on to the non-residential, and the first winner for that is going to be the Park Maintenance Department for Withers Park. Got a makeover this year. So I'll call up Jay Tesloff, Bobby Mays, and Chad Hamill. I'm told that Chad is the one that did the design and the installation of the upgrade to Withers Park, so he's kind of the star today. Uh-oh. There's Withers Park. Next we have Barry Riley, the superintendent of District 87 for Bloomington Junior High and Bloomington High School. They've created a street that truly reflects the pride they carry in their school. You guys have done a great job. It really is wonderful.
Fantastic. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
And next we have Tony Tucker accepting for Ewing Cultural Center. The person who nominated likes the fact that it's open to the public and it's a beautiful place to walk. I'm sure everybody really remembers all the bluebells that bloom in the spring on this property. Thank you.
I wonder if I could thank the entire Beautification Committee for all their hard work in this. This is really a wonderful thing, that really great set of accomplishments for our community. And now we move to public comment, and I'm going to, actually, that's slightly off. A note that it's beginning at, let's just say 6:14. If you want to actually talk about specific issues and get responses, we do have the Mayor's Open House every Friday before a regular city council meeting, so about every other week, right over there around the fishbowl, and we can try to get you answers to questions or try to get problems solved directly. Public comment is, our general policy is, of course, not to directly respond. And we have quite a few here. We may not get to everybody, so if you would be as expeditious as possible so we can possibly get to everyone. I'm going to read these in groups of 3. We start out with Kevin Hitty, and then Tim Strader, and Jane Whitward. Kevin? Good evening.
Good evening, Mayor, Council, City Manager,
Good evening.
Clerk. For nearly 100 years, Lake Bloomington has served the area with water as our water supply and a source of recreation for many, many families. Tonight, you're going to vote on an 11-page ordinance to address an issue that grew out of 16 illegal docks on the lake. Those 16 illegal docks represent about 5% of the total docks on the lake. So my question to the council is, why not address the 16 illegal docks and leave the other 200 plus as is? Even under the ordinance that's proposed this evening, the 200 current docks would be grandfathered in, so nothing is being changed or accomplished by including them in the proposed ordinance. If we look outside right now at a Main Street or Center Street, and it's highly likely that more than 5% of the cars running up and down that street are speeding. So my question to you, would it be fair to stop each vehicle out there that's speeding? Absolutely not. I think we would all agree with that. So why should we ask those who are not in violation to be penalized and incur a charge because of the 5% who are in violation? Additionally, the homeowners at Lake Bloomington have no representation with the city, as does a person living within the city limits. I did not learn of this potential ordinance change until Thursday or Friday of last week, and I think that's true for many of the residents there. I then contacted the alderman assigned as our contact and was told I am only the informal rep for Lake Bloomington. I have no official standing. And I appreciate her response, and not blaming that on her, but it begs the question, where does that leave us? Who do we go to for issues and concerns? We have no representative at the city, yet we're governed by the city. Finally, the Panagraph reported today that Michael Philippi, a Chicago-based attorney, quote, said, thinks the proposal is a good resolution. Mr. Philippi said, I was fortunate to have good, cooperative meetings with the city's attorneys and ultimately came to what I think is a good resolution to the lake leaseholders. Two things. It's important to note that Mr. Philippi owns the marina at Lake Bloomington, which will be exempt from these new fees, these new permitting fees, per Section 3 of the ordinance that's proposed this evening. Secondly, Mr. Philippi does not represent me or the other approximate 90% other residents at the lake.
I'm going to have to ask you to finish up your time, or
Okay?
wrap up.
Thank you. So, Mayor and Council, in closing, I just ask that you take a much more practical and customer-friendly approach to this issue by addressing only those 16 dock owners who are not in compliance, while retaining the good working relationship that has developed over the years with the other 200-plus residents.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks. Tim Strader, Jane Whitwood, and Peter Brandt.
Good evening, everybody, and thank you for this opportunity. We're not going to have eye contact because I got to look at this. So I just kind of parallel what Kevin was saying. This started with a dozen or so docks that maybe weren't in compliance. This is now morphed into what is going to be a $12,000 a year tax on all of the residents at the lake. That it just seems weird that it starts here, like Kevin says, and goes where now the city is benefiting greatly from that, but everybody else is paying when it should just be, this little situation taken care of. Additionally, in this ordinance, it looks to me as though seawalls are now being pulled into such that maintenance of these seawalls is going to be inspected and required maintenance and such as that. Looks to me like kind of a backdoor way to get a hugely expensive undertaking covered at the expense of the leaseholders. The leaseholders have been doing this themselves for years, and it is, I know one of my neighbors recently had a seawall put in. It was over $60,000. This is not cheap. Now we have a 25% tariff on that, so, up that a little bit. So it looks like this is now getting pulled in with these, dozen or so docks. That seems highly suspicious. Let me go back to my notes here a second. And back to what Kevin said, we have no voice with the city. I would love it if we would be able to, anytime an issue with Lake Bloomington comes before the council, I believe the city administration has an agenda, and I believe that agenda is to get more money out of lake residents. And I think that we should be able to provide our perspective on any policy making, anything that comes before the council, and just add our 2 cents worth in whatever documentation you get to read in advance of this. I think that that would help provide a better perspective on what's going on out there. And for the most part, I'm not sure, but I don't think city administration lives out there. For this particular thing, they have identified docks, which are not docks. They have never moored a boat, will never moor a boat, yet they're identified as docks. And I just use that as an example of where they're missing on many, many fronts on this, and it looks like we're trying to rush this through. we are identifying a dock as a structure that houses 3 boats. We are identifying it as one that moors 1 boat, or even some that don't moor any boats. So I look at this as just trying to be rushed through and not very well thought through, and no lake input, and I think it could really benefit from resident input. So that's pretty much what I'd like to get out on the table.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And again, next is Jane Whitwood, and then Peter Brandt and Sue Feldkamp.
Good evening. Thank you. I am Jane Whitwood, and I'm speaking on behalf of myself and my husband, Dale Whitwood. For the last 28 years, we have held a lease out at the lake. We do not currently have a house on that leased property, and we've had a dock out there for 13 years. I have shared numerous communications with the City Council showing our documentation that we have that was applicable at that time for having a dock and the type of dock that we had. At the time, the water director reviewed our documentation and approved it, and we've had that structure out there for approximately 13 years. Recently, there's been some work out at the lake pertaining to the water main work, and we were able to have our lake, have our lots used as a staging area for the city's vendors to park their equipment, to use their equipment to access their equipment. So my ask is that when you're looking at all of this, if we, Dale and I, our situation, if we can be grandfathered in, and this has been our original ask from the beginning, and if you would again take a look at our documentation that we have shared with you, we would greatly appreciate it. Again, our lot, we look at it as green space. We take care of it on a weekly basis or more often as needed. So again, I thank you for your time and consideration with what our ask is. Again, being grandfathered in. Thank you.
Thank you. Peter Brandt, Sue Feldkamp, and then Dale Whitwood.
Good evening. I'm Peter Brandt. I'm a partner in the law firm of Livingston, Barger, Brandt, and Schroeder. And so I live here in town in Diane's ward. I have a cabin that's probably an original cabin at Lake Bloomington, so it's been there for a long time. So I just got this ordinance about a week ago. I think it's been out there for about a week, and I looked at it in conjunction with our lease agreement. And our lease agreement provides that if there's going to be a change to the terms of the lease, there has to be both a notice and, importantly, a hearing. And so neither of those were provided for with this ordinance, and I think that's a problem because this ordinance is clearly directed at one thing, at the docks and at the leaseholders at Lake Bloomington. So without a notice and without a hearing, what's going to happen if this ordinance passes tonight is that it will be a change in the lease without an opportunity of the leaseholders or the lessees to comment. So what I'm asking this council to do is to set off for 60 or 90 days so that there can be a hearing. I'm not trying to railroad this off the agenda. I'm not against having an ordinance. I think it's a good idea. But I also think it's also appropriate to follow the terms of the lease so that there is, in fact, compliance with both sides of this, the ordinance and the lease. I do have some other issues with the ordinance itself, but I think that's the key to this particular document and the action that's being attempted here. Again, it's been out for a week. I don't know that everybody's read it. One thing I did note in here is this. There's, under this ordinance, it is prohibited for anyone to have a dock that meets the 2 boundaries of their property. And I would say to you, if you were out at Lake Bloomington, that affects about 85% of the people. Most of the people at Lake Bloomington have a dock that goes from boundary to boundary. And so if this ordinance is going to affect all of those people, then it's going to make a big change for everyone. So those are my thoughts about it. I would just ask this council to table this, allow for the hearing to take place, certainly notice of that, and then see if we can, as the others have talked about, have some consensus about this particular ordinance. Again, I'm not against having an ordinance. I think it's a good idea. but I think we do have to follow what the dictate is of the lease agreement. Thank you.
Thank you. Again, next is Sue Feldkamp, Dale Whitwood, and John Brandt.
Good evening. I'm here tonight to request the removal on the consent agenda of letter I for the Game Time Gym 2 for the liquor license. I'm worried about having a safe environment for our children and concerned that alcohol is playing too big a part wherever they go. I looked at the website for this Gym Time Game, I can't talk, Game Time Gym, and the website shows lots of pictures of children, grade school children. It doesn't show any adults playing games, and they offer lessons and games and tournaments, and it includes preschoolers that are taking lessons in the evening and in the daytime. I don't understand why parents need to be having a drink to watch their children play the game. They do enough hooting and hollering anyway, and alcohol, I'm afraid, is just going to make it worse. I also think it sets a bad precedence for our future licensees and other facilities. I mean, what about game time gymnastics, etc., that's near it? Are they next for a liquor license? What about our soccer fields? Will they get it? The Pepsi Center doesn't allow alcohol in their skating facility. Then I'm a little bit concerned about the gaming. I know there's a moratorium on it right now for a year, but I don't know how we can actually stop them from getting gaming. As long as they have a liquor license, they can do the gaming. We already have 258 terminals, each bringing in $518,000 so far this year. That's $518,000 from each terminal, which is money that could be spent in our city. I think it's unhealthy for the whole community, and I hope this isn't going to become a new trend. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next is Dale Whitwood and John Brandt and Gary Lambert.
Hi, my name's Dale Whitwood, and my wife said everything that I needed to say too, so that's all. I'll leave time for other people.
Thank you very much. Next, John Brandt, Gary Lambert, and David Glutzen, I believe, on Eagle Court. Eagle Point, that's a P, I'm sorry. Okay, thank you. Excuse me, go ahead. Mr. Brandt, go ahead.
My name's John Brandt, and I've been gone quite a while, and I'm back, and I'm thrilled to be back. And I would have to say I followed you closely in the newspaper and all the news media, and as always, you deal with problems and you've done a terrific job. And I know that many of the problems involve inflation of today, and I learned just a few days ago that the asphalt that they're putting down, a load of asphalt today is between $17,000 and $18,000 per truckload. That's many times greater than it was just a year or two ago. You're dealing with the inflation in many, many instances. You're doing a good job, and I think that I have to say to you, your experience is showing up nicely, and the importance of us having a wonderful Bloomington, Illinois is in your hands, and I thank you for the job you're doing. Thank you.
Thank you. Next we have Gary Lambert, David Glutzen, if I'm mispronouncing that, and then Scott Steimling.
Good evening. I see on the agenda tonight there's a number of revenue enhancements. That's in sharp contrast to the last council meeting, where this council made a gift of about $88,000 spread out over a number of years to commercial packaging. Had nothing to do with acquisition of the property. I'd like to thank both Alderwoman Painter and Schmidt for questioning that and voting no on it, because from what I can see, that opens the door. When they asked a question about it, they said that was on a case-by-case basis, not adhering to any rules or specifications or limitations or qualifications. There is the potential there for the city handing out money as political paybacks, favors. Certainly not saying any of that happened, but the potential is there. If you're going to have a procedure for giving away money, then we need to have one. That works out to about $1 per resident of Bloomington. And you have decided that that dollar belongs in a pocket of an enterprising businessman rather than a pocket of the taxpayer. Thank you.
Okay, next is, again, I do apologize if I'm mispronouncing the last name, Gulutzen, David, and then followed by Scott Steinley and then Joe Haney.
Hello, my name is David Golwitzer.
That's a W. Okay, sorry.
I'm here from Lake Bloomington. I'm the president of the Eagle Point Association, and I echo the comments over here about extending the ordinance voting. But I'm really here because in the ordinance itself there are many anomalies. There are many things that need clarification. And so I think extending the voting on that might give the time for Lake Bloomington people who are experiencing this ordinance to get back to the council members and say, hey, this language doesn't work. Here's why it doesn't work. And give you an opportunity to clarify the language. And I'm specifically here because of the 15-foot lot line setback, and one of our homeowners has their house for sale. It really says, if you read specifically, they have to take the dock out and make it conform. I'm sure that's not the intent of the city. I'm sure my question is there an appeal process to be able to leave that dock in place for a new homeowner? And that's the extent of my comments. So, thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. Scott Steinley and then Joe Haney.
Scott Steinley, Ward 5. My concern is with public service, that the other night we had a heavy downpour. The water came running down Fleetwood Drive. It had that intersection flooded. The drains were plugged. There was no way to get a hold of Mr. Karsh, no one from Public Works. I don't know. Maybe they work 8 to 5 Monday through Friday. And they don't think that this happens on weekends. It does. I wonder if the police department would shut down at 11 o'clock and not open until 7 o'clock Monday morning. The lobby is closed, true, but the police department is there. I don't think much of it, Terry. I really don't. It's a safety hazard. There is absolutely, positively no reason that the homeowner should have to go out and clean those drains out. The water was so deep, if somebody would... I had some neighbors come out and they said, well, I can't believe you were out there cleaning those drains out. I didn't want my house to flood. It was coming up over the sidewalk. And I think that's absolutely unforgivable. Maybe we need to put more money in the streets and less money in some of the things that are not as pressing. Because the people are going to leave the city. I mean, they've already started doing it. Do you want more to leave? I guess the thing is, when you have to have the police come out to assess it, and they said, yeah, it really is a safety hazard. If it would just be my word against theirs, what's to say they wouldn't be saying that? I think you better ask the police department whether it's... Fortunately, they brought an SUV. If a passenger car could not have gotten down that road. As far as, let's see. If you recall one topic, Terry, when you ran for another term, you promised that you would hold the mayoral open houses. There was one mayoral open house. Unfortunately, I got a call from a staff person, and they told me that you had canceled it that night. You didn't even have nobody even called. Otherwise, they'd have just let me show up, and nobody would have been there. I wonder if, maybe this is your way of getting rid of the people that don't agree with you. They're not pro-Terry. And as far as Mr. Gleason is concerned, I really don't have any time that he moves the city council meeting up from 7 o'clock to 6 o'clock, and it may be a little tiny thing in the paper, without making it known, I don't think much of that either. The other thing I have to bring up is on the agenda. I'll bring it up later. Thank you.
Thanks. Joe Haney.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. I didn't intend to be here tonight, but I wanted to see if anybody showed up to talk about the fees being increased on residential construction. And, in today's industry, there's a downturn in residential construction. With State Farm doing what they're doing, we're flooded with homes on the market. With the increases of the construction products and so on, it costs a heck of a lot to build a home today. And these fees, I think, were raised probably 4 or 5 years ago considerably, and we're looking to do it again. Now, once these houses are built today, the value is higher than it was, costs more to build. The city gets the construction permit on the base of what the house costs to build. So they're already getting an increase. And so we're just going to double down on it. And, I'm concerned about whether my grandchildren will ever own a home because they continue to rise. And it's not just materials. The last, when we adopted the 2012 building code, everything changed. That drove the cost up. We're probably 20-30% up from where we were prior to that. And there's a lot of things having to do with that. And I'm not in the house building business. And I haven't done I haven't built a new home in 20 years. But I think it's something you need to look at. It's a downturn right now. People are leaving Illinois. They're leaving Bloomington. And we've got enough other issues. And I know we need all the revenue we can get. And, there's got to be another way. And basically, that's all I intend to cover.
Thank you, Joe. Thanks. All right. We will move on, to the consent agenda. Are there any items or an item or items that any member of the City Council would like to pull from the consent agenda as presented? Alderwoman Bray.
Yes, Mayor, thank you. I'd like to pull item 7I, please, the game time gym.
7I. Okay. Any other items? Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented with the exception of item 7I?
I'll make that motion.
Moved by Alderwoman Painter. Is there a second? Second by Alderwoman Bray. Any further discussion? Seeing none, if everyone will go ahead and vote. Okay, the motion carries 8-0. There are no nays to announce. Madam Clerk, I'm going to go to item 7I, and I will turn to Alderwoman Bray.
Thank you, Mayor. So I wanted to pull this item so we could have a little discussion about perhaps unintended consequences or repercussions of granting this liquor license. And in particular, we had some public comment that brought up a question which I'd like to have an answer to, which is namely, does this open the door to gaming at this location once any citywide freeze has expired? So I wondered if we could speak about that and if anyone had some input in that regard.
Sure. Let's see, is our attorney, Mr. Boyle's not here. Jeff, I think the answer to that question, Jeff can correct me if I'm wrong, is that yes, once we once we lift the moratorium, then anybody who has a liquor license, I mean, some businesses like Fridays or whatever are not going to put in video gaming, but video gaming could go anywhere. Is that correct, Mr. Jurgens? If a moratorium were lifted?
Yes, as long as they have a pour license, they would be eligible for a video gaming license under the state once we lift that moratorium, if we lift that moratorium.
So a follow-up question, is there such a category as granting the liquor license, but putting some kind of a constraint such that the business does not go into the gambling arena / gaming arena?
You know, we'd have to evaluate our the video gaming license structure that we put into place recently. The state's not going to look at a comparison like that, and I don't have it pulled up. What I believe we did is, put a provision in that if they violate that, then we could pull the liquor license. So that's not something we've done before on a specific case like that. But that is something that, we could look at, but we'd have to evaluate that and get back to the council.
If I could just clarify the answer to Alderman Bray's question, I'll give the floor back to you. You said the state wouldn't look, so there may be some issues with the state?
Well, the state's only going to look to see if they've got a pour license. And
If they use it, but...
Yes.
Okay.
And so we'd have to kind of attack that on the back end. And if we were going to try and do that as a specific requirement on a license, that's what I'm saying. I think we'd have to look at the structure we have in place. We might need some modifications to that. I wouldn't recommend that we add a condition like that on the floor. I'd be more comfortable with tabling it and having us come back and look at that in the future.
Right.
If that
And
was
then the only exception to pouring is a truck stop, correct?
Right, truck stops, veterans, those types of establishments. But when we're talking about, other types, they have to have the pour license.
Stay where you are. Alderwoman Bray, any other some questions?
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions, comments? Okay. Alderwoman Bray.
Well, I'd like to make a motion that we table this until we can do a little further study into the repercussions and whether or not this aligns with the vision that we have for gaming and increased gambling in our city.
Okay. Is there a second?
Mayor, since Alderman Bray asked all the exact same questions I was going to, I'll second that, so.
Okay. All right. Discussion on the motion about, could you repeat the motion? I'm sorry.
That we table this item until such time as we've had an opportunity to review the consequences / repercussions in regards to gaming, what this kind of liquor license would mean for gaming in our community, and until such time as we see if it aligns with our philosophy.
Okay. All right. See, Alderman Black and then Howman. I saw the lights in those orders.
Thank you, and thank you for tabling. I guess I'm a little, I want some clarification from staff on what kind of time frame they would need to produce some of that information for a subsequent meeting. We're talking a month, 2 months?
Sorry about that. I'm not sure, but we'll get a response back to, I'll collect all the questions that staff has regarding the topic, and we'll get you an answer in short order.
Just on that, this has obviously been a continuing issue in the Liquor Commission, and there are several things that communities have done, and I think Mr. Jurgen could kind of clarify that. You can you can say no more than 258 terminals, or there's any number of things that you could do. You could prohibit video gaming generally. You could add a fee to it. There are any number of things that communities have done. But my understanding was that once you gave a liquor license, it would be very difficult to do what Alderwoman Bray has suggested without some sort of concerns about whether it's legal. Because there have been many times where we have thought, well, can we give this license and not give them the authority or to have video gaming or video poker. On this, I would just note that there were no comments. Not everybody can come. This is not a criticism. I'm talking about the minutes from the meeting. There were no comments in the audience either for or against this particular proposal, and the drinks were to be served on the second floor, not necessarily where the children were playing. Alderwoman, excuse me, I'm sorry, did you have a further follow-up with that?
That's fine for now, thank you.
Okay. Alderwoman Howland.
I guess I'm kind of puzzled because now we're talking about not granting any further liquor licenses until we've talked about video gaming machines, and we don't even have that on our, as far as I know, it's not even on our radar right now. So I'm a little concerned about what does the Liquor Commission do except say that they can serve beer and wine at Davis Lodge for weddings in the future?
You mean in the short run? Well, yeah, that's true. That could be an issue, or certainly a broader issue if we, in a sense, had a moratorium on liquor licenses as well.
This came to the Liquor Commission in April, or I'm sorry, August, and now it's 2 months, and now we'd be talking about another couple months before this gentleman, or this organization.
And just to clarify, this is an entertainment license, although there was some comparison, as I recall. I don't think it's in the minutes, but to Chuck E. Cheese. It's not exactly the same thing, but that was, a comparison, in the process. There isn't a second floor of Chuck E. Cheese. This is a different type of business model, and it's a different type of, environment. But I'm sorry, you still had.
No, that's all right. I'm saying if we're, I will not be voting to table this.
Alderman Sage and then Burgess.
Yeah, and I think, Diane, I think you make a good point, one of the points I was going to ask about, so thanks for asking that. I mean, the other thing I'm interested in, Terry, is how, has the Liquor Commission, have you had any conversations about the potential of this situation arising? And about which potential? The motion that Alderman Bray has put on it.
Almost every time, almost every meeting. And we ask people whether or not they're whether they would include video gaming in their business. Now, as I understand, again, I'm not really looking at, I am looking at Mr. Juergens, but Mr. Juergens isn't our main legal counsel. As I understand it, we can ask that question, and we are very happy when they say no, but that we cannot insist that they never ever have a video poker.
So again, and I wasn't at the Liquor Commission hearing, but just walk me through a couple of things here. I mean, I think there has to be sufficient, barriers, control around the serving area. I mean, I am familiar with Game Time. I mean, my kids, played there. So, and I think if this is the upstairs area where I'm talking about, we're talking about something that's clearly isolated and removed from the larger area. And so I guess part of my concern is that and again, I'm not intimately familiar with this, but I think about other locales whether it's the arena or the corn crib or other places where we clearly have the mixing of families and alcohol together, it seems to be, to me, just a little thin to start to apply a different standard here now to this situation, which is my larger point, and that is, it seems to me we have a business owner here, and Game Time has been there for a number of years. I don't know how long, but we have a business owner who's committed to Bloomington, who is, as I suspect, trying to remain competitive in a changing business landscape, and this council seems to be suggesting that we're not going to support economic development here in this situation. And so, I have some concerns about that, and about a motion to table that, because, we either want to try to extend a business-friendly, posture, which I think is important, or we don't want to put ourselves in a position where that commitment, that willingness can be called into question. Thank you.
Okay. Alderwoman Burgess.
I just want a little reminder and clarification of where we are on video gaming, because it's my recollection when we passed the one-year moratorium, that was with the understanding we would be having a conversation about looking at how we regulate that in our community and how we make sure that, its proliferation is consistent with what we'd like to see. So do we have a timeline? Do we have an understanding of where that's going to go? Because I agree with the concerns. We can't just, indefinitely withhold liquor licenses on that basis.
Just, first of all, we haven't been withholding liquor licenses, and Mr. Gleason's probably getting up to speed because he wasn't here when we passed that, and I forgot myself exactly when it was earlier this year, so we're probably 5 months away, I'm guessing, roughly, from the end of the moratorium on new video gaming. But that is certainly something that the council was to talk about. The Liquor Commission talks about it, and as I said, we've been talking about it since I've been mayor. Is there an automatic solution? There are several different options that we've all talked about before. We can present them again, and then we can have staff dig into them. Certainly legal has. And I'm looking at Mr. Juergens, but what I really mean is Mr. Boyle, and then Jeff, the gentleman in your office who sometimes helps us with liquor. Greg Mordock, yes, I'm sorry.
Pull up the code. I know we've got this addressed. I just need to get the answer back.
Right. And so and one of the things we, as I say, we'll certainly can do some of our due diligence that might, and with the legal group, that would take some of the burden off staff in having to try to bring this, to us. Not that they wouldn't be doing something, but that the options are finite as I understand them, not because of our political will, but because of state of Illinois, and that we're in a subset of them.
Okay.
And let's see, Alderwoman.
We actually had a follow-up question.
Oh, of course. I'm sorry.
I did want to hopefully hear from Alderman Bray, if you could help me understand why this particular liquor license is appropriate for holding off for some period of time. Because I think I understand that given the nature of the business that perhaps it's more appropriate here, but I do hope that you'd have the opportunity to address that so I can understand and make a decision. Thank you.
And given that, actually, I will go ahead and go to Alderwoman Bray, and then we'll go to the other comments, since you're the
Thank you,
maker of the
Mayor.
motion.
Yes, and I appreciate the input of my colleagues here as we try to sort this one out. And my thinking here is that I'd like us to know what a yes vote means. And it sounds like we're on the cusp of having our review and understanding exactly what a yes means. Are we saying yes to both alcohol and gaming at this location? Because that's potentially what a liquor license could mean here. And again, I want us to be thoughtful. Where is this located? Is this the vision that we have for the community? And I appreciate the input about the question about whether or not this passes a vigorous economic development vote, if you will. I don't see it as that. I don't see this as squelching economic development. I just see this as getting a fully informed opportunity before voting yes or no about what will happen at this location, and being able to project that into our philosophy regarding our community. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Alderman Matthey, and then back to Alderwoman Howman.
I think Alderman Bray summed it up really very well. As I see tabling this and trying to get some clarification is not stifling. It's just trying to make an informed decision. This is not the first instance where we've had a business that has come to us and they have specifically wanted a liquor license so that, let me say that again. This business came to us and they asked for a liquor license, but we've had other businesses that have come to us to get liquor licenses with the sole intention of adding gaming to their location. And that's where we had the last conversation, and where my bigger concern comes from is the addition of gaming to the location, not, as Alderman Sage said, with, like corn belters and things of that nature, where there's mixing of alcohol there. I'm more concerned about it from the gaming aspect and what saying yes to this means, and versus the actual alcohol portion of it.
Okay. Mr. Juergens, if I could ask one question before I go to Alderwoman Howman. There are legal standards also then for the establishment of the gaming itself. Is that the case?
Yeah, and I think I maybe found the answer as I refresh my memory here. We put in, so we've got the license requirements, which we enacted back in earlier this year. And those who do not comply, they're subject both to a daily fine, which I think is up to $500 per day, and their machines are also subject to seizure. So essentially, so even if they get the license from the state, and this is something that other communities, an approach that other communities have done as well, so even if they're, technically entitled to a license because they've got a poor license and they're entitled license to a state, if they don't comply with our permitting requirements, then we can both fine them and we can actually seize the machines. So there's not really a good way for somebody to get to maintain video gaming at their establishment until we lift that moratorium and start issuing more video gaming licenses.
Right.
That helps answer or clarifies the...
Okay, but if let's say the moratorium on new video poker gaming or video gaming is not extended, let's say whenever it is, let's say it's March. At that point, any business that wants to add them, there are space issues and regulations in the state? Is that the case?
What do you mean by space issues?
By certain number of space and where it's located, physically located?
Yeah, they can only have so many machines. They've got to be at a location within the establishment that's blocked off from the other minors and other things like that. So there are a number of state regulations as well that go along with that.
Okay. You might want to hang around. Alderwoman Howman and then Black.
Just a quick follow-up to Mr. Alderman Sage. I believe the McDowells have had the business for 18 years. Yeah, 2000. And at the Liquor Commission meeting, they were pretty specific about the bans, and it's a small area on the mezzanine that's not secluded, but specific to that, so it wouldn't be kids coming in and out and that kind of thing. And I'm sorry, not wristbands, stamps, because wristbands could, I guess, I don't know why the difference, but anybody coming in to get beer or wine would have to have that stamp on their hand. So I'm not, except for the video gaming machines, I'm not sure why we're questioning this.
Okay. Alderman Black.
Yeah, thank you. And I guess I'm having a hard time, maybe I'm off base here, and why this conversation is being imbued with video gaming. I get the potential down the road, but from where I'm seeing, the conversation in the minutes that I read from the Liquor Commission, there wasn't a whole lot of discussion about video gaming terminals. I'm sympathetic to the concerns that are raised, but I think that a lot of that was discussed inside the minutes. I guess from a procedural standpoint, if this motion were to fail, it would go back to the original motion, and then we can take it from there.
Well, there was no original motion, so you could either entertain a motion to approve it or a motion to deny it.
Well, we do have a motion on the
If we
table.
went back,
If
if
we
that
went back.
failed.
Okay, so if that failed, we'd basically be where we started at square one. Yeah, I'm satisfied with the Liquor Commission's report as presented, and I'll be voting no on this, but in support of the license after that.
Let's just also clarify that regardless of what happens this evening, we have a future conversation on video poker at the point, certainly as we begin to move toward the point where the moratorium begins to expire. And again, I don't know what, I think Steve and I talked about this when he was interim, when the moratorium went into place, but and certainly, as I say, the Liquor Commission always asks that question, but it was not on our immediate radar screen. I think we had other things that Mr. Gleason and I have been speaking about. And as I say, Mr. Gleason obviously wasn't here at that point, so this is one of the things we're getting him up to speed on. Alderwoman Burgess.
Sorry, I have one more question. So let's assume that we were to give them a liquor license today, and then we were to make changes to our gaming ordinance or our gaming regulations. Would they be subject to those changes? Or would they be operating under the current paradigm, assuming there was no moratorium?
Would they be, if we lifted the moratorium, would they then have to comply with our licensing provisions?
If before we lifted the moratorium, we changed the regulations, would they have to be comply with those?
Yes.
Okay, so they wouldn't be grandfathered into the old.
I do not believe they'd be grandfathered in because they haven't applied yet and they haven't been granted a license or anything yet.
Okay.
Help me understand more where you're going with that, because I think it's a quick.
Yeah, if you could put your, if you,
Okay,
for the record.
Sure.
Yeah, my question was, I think you're raising a good point. Talk just with me a little bit further about that, about where I think maybe you're going, because I want to be sure I understand.
Okay, thank you. So what I'm trying to get to is, if the concern is the question of whether or not we would want a facility like this to have video poker gaming available to them, we're not risking allowing them to do that without contemplation because we'll have the opportunity to make any changes we want to before the moratorium is lifted. And so long as they have to follow those regulations, then I think we're okay, and we don't necessarily have to take a stay on the liquor license. If we're comfortable with the liquor license, we're not accidentally preventing ourselves from regulating this facility. Is that
Is that a fair
Yeah,
statement?
I think if I
Is that
understand
fair?
your question, I mean, obviously it's a year-to-year permit, so you could make changes to any of them. But yes, if you're contemplating, should we put some more restrictions in here as to who's eligible, that type of thing, I would foresee that as something that could be doable.
Okay, all right. At this point, we're going to go ahead and vote on the motion that was made by Alderwoman Bray, seconded by Alderman Matthew. Yes. Sure. Would you put your...
Just a quick clarification, how long are we talking about in terms of review?
In terms of review?
Right, on a motion.
On tabling.
On tabling, right.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
Just until such time as we could get answers to some of these questions, and I think the point that Alderman Burgess makes is a good one. This idea of how this is staged and whether or not, if we take action now before we know the answer to the gaming question, will this get grandfathered in and have an ability to go forward with gaming when that's not the intention? And frankly, the gaming piece wasn't really on my radar until we had some public comment about that, and I'd just like to have an opportunity to hear a little bit more about, again, what is our philosophy about gaming before we go forward. This is a unique facility with children, and it just, I want to be able to have some time to consider that. So again, I would recommend tabling this for a brief time, perhaps, 30 days? Would that be reasonable?
That's kind of what I was trying to get at is, if the staff
30
can
days?
give us an idea of how long it would take so that we don't unnecessarily delay something that could happen.
Yeah, 30 days.
30 days? Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Okay, if everyone will go ahead and vote on the motion as presented, please.
What is the motion again, stated?
To table this until such time as we can get additional information to understand the repercussions of granting this liquor license, and in particular, how does it apply to our philosophy of gaming in the community? No later than 30 days.
Okay. Okay. The motion fails 5-3. There are 5 names to announce, Madam Clerk.
Alderman Sage, Alderman Burgess, Alderman Painter, Alderman Black, and Alderman Hallman.
Okay. All right. Now, is there a motion an alternative motion to approve the liquor license as presented? Again, we do understand that no matter what, we're coming back. No matter what we do this evening, we are coming back to talk about video gaming before the moratorium ends. Alderwoman Howman?
I would move that we approve the application of Game Time Gym, requesting the EBS liquor license.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Alderman Sage. We could go ahead and vote on that motion. Okay. That motion fails 7-1. There's 1 nay to announce, Madam Clerk.
Alderman Bray.
Okay. Oh, excuse me, it passes. Thank you. It passes. Okay, 7-1. There's 1 nay to announce. Okay, we move on to our regular agenda, and we start out with the ratification of the collective bargaining agreement between the International Association of Machinists, Aerospace Workers Lodge 1000, and the City of Bloomington. And I'm going to go ahead and turn this over to our City Manager, Mr. Gleason.
Thank you, Mayor. This is a new practice that we're going to have. Instead of collective bargaining agreements being on the consent agenda, which has been the history of this council in the past, I'm actually going to take the opportunity on this item and then in fact the next item to just hit some high points. What you'll find on the collective bargaining agreements, where we're at this point, the union and the management side have negotiated. There's a tentative agreement, and then the union membership have voted on this collective bargaining agreement, and now it's before council for the final step in the process. Feel that there's great value, not dissimilar to the newly adopted finance director's report, that when we're talking about wages, benefits for our employees, it's something that we take a couple of minutes to communicate very quickly and allow for that opportunity. So on this item A, it is a 2-year agreement, just like the mayor said, with Lodge 1000. That is in the water department. It's a 2-year agreement with 2% raises for each of the 2 years. And then on the benefits side, we actually agreed to language that the city has exclusive right to make changes to carriers and alter or amend insurance plans, which is very beneficial to the city. And then also implement that parties agreed that spouses and domestic partners who have access to medical insurance will be ineligible for city medical insurance, which has been a strategy of the city recently. Other items, but again, just wanted to cover some of the high points very quickly. Thank you.
Is there a discussion on this or a motion?
I'll make a motion we approve as presented.
Moved by Alderman Black. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Alderwoman Bray. Any discussion? Seeing none, if you'll go ahead and vote on this, the motion made by Alderman Black and Alderwoman Bray. All right. Everybody voted that wanted to vote? Okay. The motion carries 8-0. There are no nays to announce, Madam Clerk. Okay. And then we move on to the next item, ratification of wages for AFSCME Local 699. Again, I'm going to turn this over to Mr. Gleason.
Thank you, Mayor. Very quickly, another win-win, we believe, is what's being presented to council tonight. This was a one-year reopener with the Local 699 AFSCME group, and it was on wages and benefits. The wage agreement that has been agreed upon and before council tonight for approval is a 1.75 or a 1 3/4% pay raise that would be retroactive to May 1 of 2018. And then also of note on the health insurance plan deductible, it's increased to $600 on the individual and $1,200 on the family effective January 1, 2019, if approved, which is up from $400 for the individual and $800 for the family. Again, just walk through it very quickly. Just wanted to share publicly.
Okay. Are there any questions, comments, or a motion on this to accept?
I move that we accept this as written.
Okay. Moved by Alderwoman Painter. Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
Second by Alderwoman Hellman. Any further discussion, questions? Seeing none, if everyone would vote. Motion carries 8-0. There are no nays to announce, Madam Clerk. We move on to item C, 8C, and that is consideration of an ordinance adopting Chapter 23 of the City Code to implement a comprehensive dock permitting program and adopting boat dock construction standards as requested by the administration and the water departments. And we start out with a 10-minute presentation and then approximately 15-minute council discussion. I'm going to go ahead and turn this over to Mr. Gleason.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll turn this over quickly to Jeff Juergens. There's been a fair amount of time that has been spent on this. I think it's been a very public, at times, a very public discussion over the last 3 years. Go ahead, Jeff. And we think that we have brought to council a very fair and reasonable approach.
understand that there might be some details to work out, which can be done in the off-season before we have the 2019 boating season. Council back in April directed staff to take certain cases to administrative court, and we feel that we seized an opportunity to address these in different groups, and then collectively overall to once and for all address the permitting issues and some of the challenges out at Lake Bloomington. Jeff?
Thanks, City Manager, and I'll just expand upon that a little bit. We're actually very excited to be in front of you tonight on this. And I know you heard some concerns earlier. It's actually, we are here to make things better. I think I'll be able to answer a lot of questions and address a lot of the concerns that have been raised here. So we're actually very excited about this, and we're excited to work with the people who have the lake leases and these docks out at Lake Bloomington. One of the things I'll talk about is there has really not been a great permitting structure out at the lake. We talked earlier, the last direction that the council gave us was to go out and send compliance order to about, I think there were maybe about 24 or so different docks that did not have permits out there, that there were some issues with. We did that. We then engaged in conversations with their counsel, Mike Felipe, who represents a large number of them. And so we were working on different ways to address all of this. But as we were working on this, we realized we were really looking at kind of a Band-Aid approach to a much larger problem that needed to be addressed. Although the city code states that permits are required, as I mentioned, there's just not a whole lot in terms of process that has ever been in place out at the lake, and not a lot of good, different things that have taken place regarding that. We came to find out that even, we were going out and siting a lot of the docks that we talked about that did not have permits. A lot of the docks, even with some of the lakefront properties, do not have permits. Some do have building permits, but others do not. There's not kind of an annual process related to any of that, and so we really needed to engage a comprehensive dock permitting structure. And I will stress, as part of that, we are trying to make it as easy as possible for everybody out there to make sure that they can come into compliance and we can really get a better, improved situation out there. And we believe once we do that, this really will make that situation better at the lake, and it'll make their lives easier and better. And so we are really excited about that. But just as an example, there are, we'll talk about, there are about 236 docks that we think would immediately come into compliance with this. But the docks out there, they're not numbered. There's no, structure to any of them. There's no, annual inspections. There's just really no process at all related to that. So this comprehensive system is really going to address a lot of issues. I'll take just a second and go over some of the highlights of the requirements. The first is eligibility. Who's going to be able to obtain a dock permit? And what we came up with was we wanted people to have a lake lease. Within these lake leases, they actually have access easements to the lake. Nobody actually leases property that touches lake water. They all have to cross some sort of marginal land, and they have access easements to do that. So we thought, number one, that's a good time. That's a good connection to the city. We also wanted to ensure that they either have a residence or a business or a not-for-profit, or that they, somehow have some sort of entity like that on the property. The reason for that is because we want to ensure that they have oversight and connection to the city. Even if they're not living there year-round, if they have a house on that leased property, they're going to be out there on a routine basis making sure that that house is taken care of. And while they're out there doing that, we want to make sure that they're taking care of their dock, making sure that there's proper oversight of the dock. We also want to make sure that these eligibility requirements make sure they have a proper interest in what's going on at the lake. This means they're basically neighbors to the people out there. This is going to help with some of the quiet enjoyment activities, that we talk about, and that we're wanting to ensure that they're all good neighbors with one another, ensure they all, know each other, and they're all helping each other with this. So the first thing we talk about is who is eligible for a dock, and those are the criteria that we came up with. The second, and this will address a lot of the issues or a couple of the issues that you heard come up. First, it's clear in this ordinance you cannot block public access. So some of the docks do come off some of these public access points, and we want to make sure that they don't encroach on the 15-foot setback requirement. And that way, if other people want to access the lake through those public access points, they can clearly do so. Now, you heard some conversation about people who are concerned that, they're lakefront property and they're concerned they're within that 15-foot setback. That is not really the intention, so to speak, of the city. Ideally, you'd be 15 foot away, always from that lot line. But really what we're talking about, we're not talking about the boardwalk. There's a lot of boardwalk out there. What we want to make sure is the dock is 15 foot away. And that's so that the boats can get in and out without kind of encroaching on that other person's lot line. So it's not, if the boardwalks go in that distance of that marginal land, that's not an issue with us. We just want to make sure that their actual dock is 15 foot away. Now let's take a situation where maybe today it's not 15 foot away, and they're one of those lakefront leaseholders. In that situation, under our regulations, they can keep that dock as is. They're grandfathered into that. It's only if they have to do kind of take that dock out and a complete reconstruction, then we're going to ask them to put that at least 15 feet away from the lot line. The water department does get quite a few complaints every year about docks that maybe get too close to those lot lines. So we're really just trying to, address that going forward. Of course, if we were to have a new lake lease come in and, somebody wanted to put in a new dock out there, then yeah, we're going to say you've got to be at least 15 foot away from the lot line. But again, if they're not 15 foot and they're not on a public access point, they're going to be allowed to keep their dock as is. A lot of other requirements here. We've got, we'll require insurance, indemnity language. We require things like this for the boat registrations that we give out every year, but we don't have anything for the docks right now. We've got, we'll be able to have on-site inspections. Again, we'll be able to have all the docks numbered and the permits displayed so that our staff can actually go out and everybody will actually have a number. Right now, one of the things we've already started doing is going out and documenting each dock out there. You'll see in our group Exhibit B, we've started to label where we think all those docks are that are existing and that will be, we already know we think these will be eligible for a permit. And so we've already started the process of creating files on all these docks. They'll have to make sure that the docks are kept in good repair. Again, this is just kind of a standard provision and really should be a benefit to the entire lake community to make sure there are not docks that are in complete disrepair out there. We'll limit what can be on a dock that is not for human habitation, those types of things. Again, I already talked about this, and this to me is a key one. We want to make sure that these docks are not being used to interfere with the peaceful enjoyment of the lake. This is something we've heard a concern from lake residents before. We want to make sure that, these docks are being used for their intended purpose on our beautiful lake. Finally, a lot of provisions in the ordinance that make sure that the dock cannot impact water quality. Again, so that there's not material being used that would impact water quality or that there's not, dumping or different things like that going off of the docks. Talk a little bit about the construction standards. Again, the construction standards apply to the new docks. So somebody's, got a new lease and they want to put in a new dock. They've got now construction standards telling them where they're going to come in, what type of material, they can use, how far out that dock can extend, those types of things. But if they already have a dock out there, again, they're going to be grandfathered in. It's going to be as is. I'll borrow a bad line from President Obama. If you like your dock, you can keep your dock. Hopefully I can stand by that more so. And I have to attribute that line originally to Steve, who came up with that in a meeting. But that's really the intent here. We're trying to make this as easy as possible for the people at the lake to be able to keep the docks that they have. Now, if your dock is in disrepair or something like that, then yeah, you've got to put your dock up and make sure it's in good repair. In relation to this as-is type situation, we still are going to allow, you're not going to have to get a new dock, you're not going to have to get a new permit or a new building permit if you're just replacing hardware, if you're doing some sealing, if you're doing minor decking replacement, if you're replacing handrails. We have a laundry list of things in here that you can go ahead and do to your dock to maintain your dock on a yearly basis. You do that, that's fine. You don't need a building permit. You don't need to do anything. You're good. So again, we're trying to make this as easy as possible at the people at the docks. The permitting. One of the things we've heard from this council, one of the things we've heard from the water department is we want to stop the proliferation of docks at Lake Bloomington. Maybe start to get a little bit of a handle on it. So we have a limit in here that there's only going to be 245 dock permits that can be issued. Right now we estimate there are probably about 236 docks that are out there that are going to be applying for a dock permit and eligible under the criteria that we've established. We know that there are probably about 8 docks still left to address, and we will continue to work on those. The process is that current dock owners will apply for and must obtain a dock permit by March 2019. Thereafter, this will be on a calendar year, kind of matching what they have to do to apply for their boat registration stickers. Just a note here, the council can obviously come back and let's say we've got some more development out there and you need to have 250 dock permits. Obviously, the council can come back in the future and raise that number as you seem fit and as you deem reasonable. The fees. The new dock fees are going to be $250. The renewal is going to be $50. In the provisions, we are going to treat the 236 docks that we believe are eligible for permits to come in under that renewal fee. Again, some of them have permits, some of them do not. We're going to treat them all as renewal and charge them the $50 renewal fee. This is not, as somebody suggested, necessarily a money grab or a tax. This is really just meant to be a nominal fee that will help cover the cost of this program. It is going to cost to have staff go evaluate all of these docks, to order and to ensure the numbering system, to keep track of these docks, to respond to questions, to respond to compliance issues. We do not anticipate this $50 fee will actually cover all of the staff time involved in this, but this will certainly go to help. Keep in mind, there's no annual fee associated with any of these docks right now. So staff has been doing this, intensive work, probably more intensive than anybody can imagine, working on all of these dock issues over the last 2 or 3 years. So we are not going to recover going forward, based on an annual fee of $50, but it certainly will help cover some of the cost of this program. The removal provisions, again, this will just help provide clarity. It will make sure that everybody, has a level playing ground and knows, that you can, what types of notices you're going to get, establishes notices and removal requirements. One of the big questions we get now is, what is the process out there if somebody's doing something that violates something, how do we address that? And so this new ordinance clarifies all of that and gives a good framework. I think we've got 30-day requirements in there. Everybody will have ample notice. Received a couple of calls about this on Friday afternoon. One of the guys said, well, I just want to make sure you don't come out and rip out my dock. And no, that's not the intent of the city. We will be working with everybody, make sure that we help get them into compliance and that type of thing. Some of the benefits. Number one, this ensures that the dock owners have proper oversight and connection to the city. And again, we're talking about that eligibility. We want people that have very clear connections both to the city and to their docks and will help maintain and will ensure that these docks are kept in good order and that they are good neighbors to everybody else. This will create a tracking system for the docks, something that has been sorely lacking and definitely needed at Lake Bloomington. Establishes standards and requirements to help protect water quality. Again, something that's a concern of everybody in this room. It establishes clear requirements for eligibility and removal of the docks. Nobody's going to be going out willy-nilly and, tearing out docks or doing anything like that. Helps ensure the peaceful enjoyment of the lake. Another very important criteria here. Clarifies all the requirements. One of the things that I think is very important is, for the first time we'll have the insurance and indemnity requirements. We have this already for boat registration, but believe it or not, we have not had something like this in place for the dock permits. So again, it's just, these are things that are sorely needed at Lake Bloomington. I think they are things that can be really a benefit to everybody. What are the next steps? We will develop the application and the related permits. Our hope is, and you'll learn a little bit about this when we talk about business registration next, but our hope is to utilize an online tool that's being created for business registration where people can apply for their dock permits and hopefully even pay for them online. Again, making this seamless and seamless for the people that are out there. We will work with the leaseholders regarding the permitting process, answer questions. I foresee lots of meetings, and we've already been responding to emails and telephone calls, but we're going to have to do a complete education process to help make sure that everybody understands and everybody is getting what they need from those residents. And then we will continue to work with the non-compliant docks, see what can be accomplished there, and address those ones that don't necessarily fall under this program. I will say, there were a couple of other questions that were raised about what was a public hearing necessary. And there's a difference in interpretation on this. Mr. Brandt talked about there was a change to the terms of the lease, and that triggered a notice in a public hearing. Our stake is that this does not impact the lease premises. Yes, those that have leases are going to be eligible for this program, but this is not something that requires a public hearing. So, this is one of those things where this is the city's program. This is the city's lake. These are docks that we want to make sure we have good control over in terms of not interfering with water quality, not interfering with the different things going out of there, that we can maintain a system that numbers and we can process these docks and keep control of them so we don't have wildcat docks going up here and there. We can enforce the rules, the provisions of the ordinance and that type of thing. So I understand that provision, but we maintain that's not the case. And in fact, later in the lease, it talks about the city can also establish rules and regulations for swimming and those types of things, and that does not have a public hearing component to it. I would argue this is more akin to that, but it even goes further because this is actually a permitting structure. These aren't rules and regulations, and no one is entitled to a dock permit. So we believe that those public hearing requirements are not going to be applicable. Again, we heard a lot about the 15-foot setback requirement. I think I have hopefully addressed and clarified that it's not the intent for those lakefront leaseholders to have to move, their boardwalks, and that it's really their docks, and even those will be as is. But one of the things we can consider is amending our construction standards, which staff can do later to maybe, allow for some variances or some other things like that if a lot's too small or if the neighbors don't disagree. So those are all things we can work on. And this is really kind of a starting point. We could be back with some tweaks to this as we engage in different conversations. But overall, we're really excited about this. Staff has worked very hard on coming up with these provisions. We did have, some conversations with Mike Felipe about what we thought might work with some of the non-compliant docks. We're really excited to get those into a form where we think they can fit well at Lake Bloomington. But I will say that he did not see an advance copy of this ordinance. We sent this both to Mike Felipe and the Lake Bloomington Association both at the same time on Monday. So no one had favorable treatment here. We really wanted to come together and figure out a system that we thought would work best for the city. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Questions? Alderwoman Hellman.
Not really a question. but thanks for the clarification, because you did answer my questions that I had. This is not a perfect ordinance, to be sure, but each situation is different, and so there cannot really be a perfect ordinance. This effort begins the process of getting some order in a situation that has been left unattended for far too long. It will begin to give clarity to all concerned and begin to take action on this situation before it becomes worse. So, that being said, I move to approve this ordinance amending Chapter 23 of the City Code without any delay.
Okay. Is there a second to Alderwoman Hellman's motion?
I'll second.
Okay. Second by Alderman Milowambwe, because he hit the button. Okay. I noticed. Alderman Matthey.
Jeff, during public comment, we had somebody who asked a question about sale of property. So I know that the stance of the water department before has been that permits for docks do not transfer. However, if somebody sold a property and the dock was grandfathered in and there was no substantive changes of that, would that dock stand and continue to be grandfathered until such a time that it need to be replaced? Or with the switch of owner, is it the dock grandfathered or the owner's grandfathered, I guess is the question.
Yeah, that's a great question, and that's something we considered. We have something in here that's called kind of a, I forget what the exact language we used, but basically you can apply for a transfer permit. So if you're selling it, then we can start the paperwork, and yes, that'll go over again as is. So there will be a fee that the new person will have to pay, but yes, that dock does not, just because you're transferring your lease or you're selling your property, does not mean that you have to rip out the dock and put in a new one. That dock will transfer with the property.
Okay. And something that you and I talked about a little bit offline is there was also concern from people about the requirement of minor decking repairs versus a total decking, and yet being held to a maintenance standard on those. And I think we had a good, that is very similar to the way that we would treat buildings in the city, that decking repairs could happen over multiple years that would not trigger differences of opinion, I think is kind of where we came to on that one.
Yeah, and that's another thing that we spent a lot of time on, because it's not our intent to kind of nickel and dime people and say, gotcha, and now you got to, get a new permit or you got to replace your dock. We actually want to encourage routine maintenance and upkeep of these docks. So those types of things you can continue to do without getting a new permit or having any issues with the city. When it comes to the decking, we also understand that, there might be some, minor decking that you're replacing from time to time. I think the way the city is going to look at that is if you're completely, removing your structure, that's when this is going to apply. If you're doing, maybe 75% of the decking, 1 year, that's fine. If you want to finish the next year or something, we understand that's going to happen. But it's that opportunity, I think, if your dock is in such disrepair that you need to take the whole thing out, and I'll explain the reason for this. The reason at that point in time that we want a building permit and make sure the construction standards are applicable, because at that point in time, we can actually make sure that you're doing it to the standards that we want. And that's the right time to maybe have that conversation. But if you're just replacing the decking, no, we understand that's going to happen, and that's not a problem.
Okay. And then the final thing is just more of a clarification statement, is that I think there were some people that were under the impression that the water department thought that docks contributed to poor water quality, and we got clarification that's not true. My understanding from talking to Mr. Yale is that it's not the docks, it's the number of boats and the engines of the boats that stir up silt. That's the bigger question. So the limitation on docks is more a limitation of saying if we have fewer boats that are stirring up the sediments from the bottom, that's a better thing for the quality of the water.
The only other thing I would add to that is my understanding is that there can also be concerns with the type of material you use for docks. So I think there are some prohibitions here on some types of materials that we don't necessarily want in the water. And then also, obviously, we don't want people dumping their trash or, pouring gas or that type of thing off of a dock. So it's those types of things that, yeah, we're addressing in terms of the dock and the water quality.
Okay, thank you. I will agree with Diana that this is maybe not a perfect ordinance, but we get through like 90%, and then we can spend time figuring out those last 8 or whatever docks, so thank you.
Yeah, and just again for clarification, we anticipate maybe the permitting process starting, in January, maybe a little before, and then going through March. And our hope is to have this system up in place before the next boating season. That'll give us time to work with all the people out there and get, really my hope is to get all of their concerns addressed and really work, with the people that have these docks.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay, we have a motion on the floor, and if you'll go ahead and vote on the motion as presented. Motion carries 8-0. There are no nays to announce, Madam Clerk, and we move on. Thank you, Mr. Jurgensen. Thank you, Mr. Rasmussen and Mr. Gleason for all the work that you've done on this. We move, now to item 8D, consideration of an ordinance amending Chapter 11 of the Bloomington City Code to establish business registration requirements as required by police, fire, finance, information services, and community development departments and the city's Office of Economic Development. And we have a brief presentation. I'm going to start with Mr. Gleason and a brief council discussion. So I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Gleason.
Thank you, Mayor. Staff was directed by this council in March of this year to bring what is a final product for consideration tonight. I believe there were 3 additional options that were presented at that time for the registration fee component, whether there be $0, $50 annual with a $50 renewal, and then a $50
Excuse me, I wonder excuse me, we need to continue our meeting. If you want to have a conversation, would you please go out to the hallway? Thank you. I'm sorry, continue.
All good. All right. In March, staff was directed to bring this topic back to council tonight. That's a result of the efforts of Bob Mart, Austin Grammer, the different department directors. This is a business registration ordinance for consideration. It is to capture data. Economic development is probably something that we think about, knowing what kind of businesses operate in this community. We are able to track trends, share this information with other governmental entities, with the EDC, with the Chamber of Commerce. But there's also a critical public safety component that we have not captured in this community. And Austin, go ahead and approach, and he's going to have a brief presentation and look to have this matter resolved.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Thank you, City Manager Gleason, for the introduction, and I'd like to take this opportunity to thank Police Chief Wheeler, Assistant Police Chief Bays, Fire Chief Moore, Finance Director Rathbun, and Community Development Director Bob Mart for their assistance with this project. As you can see, we have a number of departments listed here in relation to the proposed business registration program. This type of registration program has been desired by these city departments for many years, as it will enable city staff to more efficiently provide services to the city's business community and in turn the city's residents and visitors. As the city manager alluded to, it was back in the budget setting process for FY 2019 that the City Council directed staff to come back with a business registration ordinance, a one-time fee of $50 to cover the costs of the administration of the program, with an estimated cost recovery of for FY 2019 of $200,000. Since that time, staff has conducted research into business registration programs and ordinances in communities across Illinois, nationwide, and of course right here in McLean County, all in an effort to determine best practices for such a program. And as I mentioned earlier, the business registration program being proposed tonight will enable multiple city departments to more efficiently serve the city's business community. So let's take a look at some of those examples. I had a lot of fun on Google images, pulling off some very descriptive pictures here. So in this image, we see that a car has accidentally crashed into an insurance agent's office. Imagine that this happened on a late summer Sunday afternoon. All the businesses in the shopping center are, of course, closed for the day, including the insurance agent's office. The police are called out to the scene by a passerby, and when they arrive, they assist the driver and wait for a tow truck with the driver. The responding officers try to call the insurance agent's office using the publicly listed phone number, but they get voicemail because the office is closed. It's a Sunday. The responding officers then have to spend additional time on the scene trying to track down the building owner and the insurance agent so that one or both of them can come over and secure the property, and then so that the police can leave and get back to their patrol. With the business registration program as proposed, the police department would already have the property owners and business owners' emergency contact information readily available and could potentially make contact more quickly and be back out on patrol more quickly. In this image, we see the potential of different chemicals and dangerous flammable materials that certain businesses might have in their possession on their premises. If a fire were to break out and the fire department would be called to a business like this, would our first responders know the types of dangers that are lurking within? By having a business registration program in place, the fire department would be alerted to new businesses planning to open in the city and also be made more aware of existing businesses in the city that have the potential to have these types of dangers on site. Once notified through the registration program, appropriate staff from the fire department could contact and visit the new or existing business and consult on appropriate safety measures, potentially including the installation of hazard placards outside the business like those pictured on the right. This type of communication, early and often facilitated by the proposed business registration program, could help the fire department choose the right equipment when responding to an emergency and help keep our first responders safe. In this image, we see an extreme case of a building safety property maintenance problem on private property. A sinkhole has developed in a private parking lot. The parking lot should be closed off by the property owner and the underlying issue addressed immediately. But perhaps the part-time employee on duty at the tanning salon does not know the name or number of the landlord, and the salon owner maybe is on vacation. So currently, the only public record that the city has for the property owner is the mailing address on file with the county treasurer for property tax purposes. If this was your building, would you want to be notified of this issue by the city through the snail mail? Or would you appreciate a phone call on the emergency contact number your tenant has on file with her business registration? One common issue that the city's finance department encounters is new food and retail businesses that open in the city but don't first register with the city's finance department. Even though the State Department of Revenue requires businesses to collect and remit the city's home rule sales tax, often these food retail type businesses are not aware of or forget to collect the city's local 2% prepared food and beverage tax. This error can cause in a few months of lost tax revenue to the city and also create an unfair competitive advantage for this retailer compared to other existing retailers who are properly collecting the city's local tax. Once the city is made aware of the food and beverage retail business operating or soon to operate, the retailer is responsible for repaying the city any unpaid sales tax, and this potentially can create an economic hardship for that retailer if they had not been collecting that tax from their customers. Through the proposed business registration program, the finance department can be proactive and reach out to new businesses as they register before opening to inform the business of the city's local taxes. And I receive calls in my office at least once a week of a new business that's looking to open in the city, and they say, what kind of business registration or licensing program do you have? Can I register? How do I get registered? When I tell them we don't currently have a program, some of them are sometimes a little surprised because they're so used to having something like that in the other communities in Illinois or elsewhere where they operate. And one of the potential advantages of instituting a program like this is the city's ability to import and export out of this registration database and into our city's GIS system, where we could associate business contact information with geographic points, GPS coordinates through the GIS, So potentially if we have a situation where there's a upcoming construction project or a utility issue, even with one of our partners like IDOT or Ameren, we can highlight draw a circle in the GIS system and export out of that contact information that could be then used either via email or automated phone calls, again, things that would be low staff outreach time commitments to notify these businesses of these potential issues. Now, as staff did research on other communities' business registration programs, one of the questions that we had was, should we as the City of Bloomington require home-based businesses to register? And as looking at what other communities are doing, we found that the communities that do require home-based businesses to register into their programs are often the communities that also have very robust entrepreneur networks and programs to foster entrepreneurism in their community. Doing some additional research, we found that the Global Entrepreneurship Research Association did a study and found that 69% of businesses start in the home and 59% of established home-based businesses more than 3.5 years old continue to operate from the home. So really your home-based occupations are your entrepreneurs, and so staff is proposing that we include home-based occupations in our proposed business registration program, so that way we can get a better track and understanding of the number of entrepreneurs that we have operating in our community. And that's also something that's been pointed out in the BN Advantage Action Agenda. BN Advantage, of course, a program that's been endorsed by the City Council. And in the action agenda for BN Advantage, it directs us to adopt indicators and metrics to assess economic development process by tracking new business startups and the number of business licenses that are issued or businesses registered. And so it's our hope that by capturing this information about our entrepreneurs, we'll be able to get them in touch with other partner organizations like the SBDC and BN Advantage and the Economic Development Council in order to help foster and grow our base of entrepreneurs in the community. The way that we envision this working is a very streamlined and customer-friendly, business-friendly online registration program. What we found is that we have existing capability within the city's Tyler Munis program to be able to assist businesses with registering online 24 hours a day through the city's website. We would, of course, notify businesses of the need, if the program is adopted, to register and direct them to do so. And I can show you just a couple of quick screenshots of how this would work. This is a web page that we currently have set up on the city's website through the Munis self-service portal. We're currently using one of the modules for this for vendor self-service for the businesses that we do business with, but new businesses would be able to see a little icon would pop up on the right side of the screen, and here's some screenshots for the way that it would work. Basically, the business types in their information, who the ownership of the business, that then creates what in the Tyler Munis realm calls a business license, but we're using this as a business registration. They would then add in some additional information about where they're located. We can have that tie in again with the GIS system and populate potentially their parcel number or autocorrect their address, similar to if you're shipping a package through the mail or UPS or FedEx. Then the license would then be created and they could verify their information and then submit it. Now, what we're proposing for charges for these registrations, again, directed by the City Council, a one-time $50 registration fee and then annual renewals at no charge. We believe that we can leverage the Tyler Munis by accepting credit cards online. This will begin to be very customer friendly. And this also opens, once we have this system in place and up off the ground, opens the ability for the city to leverage this same platform and tool for many of the other cities' license programs and other ways that we collect payments from businesses. So we really see this as just the first step in being a more business-friendly and customer-friendly city by being able to take these payments online. Be happy to answer any questions about the ordinance. Would want to add, though, that the home-based businesses and also not-for-profits would be exempt from paying the $50 registration fee. However, as is outlined in the ordinance, there would be late fees or penalties for not registering or not keeping the registration up to date, and those penalties would apply equally to the for-profit businesses and the non-for-profit and the home-based businesses. We want to ensure that the businesses, when they register, come back annually, even though there's no charge to re-renew. We want to make sure that they keep that information evergreen.
Okay. Questions? Okay. Yes. Alderwoman Hellman.
Yes, actually, these are from Alderman Schmidt, who can't be here tonight. Her questions include, how did we arrive at the $50 fee? Is it connected somehow to economic development, or?
Staff looked at a number of different similar programs in other cities. We found multiple municipalities that had minimum reoccurring annual fees of $250, annual fees of $500, up to $2,500 based on square footage of the building. So, of course, bigger businesses would pay a higher fee. We believe that the $50 fee is very reasonable and is in line with what a number of other municipalities that have a program and charge a fee. If it's not one of those more expensive fees that I referenced, it's typically around that $50 rate.
And then is that fee going some way into economic development or into the general fund, or what happens to the?
The fee revenue would go into the general fund and would help to offset the cost to implement the program and maintain it on an annual basis. Some of the different data sharing that I referenced will certainly have a cost to get set up and established, leveraging the technology, whether or not we bring in an outside vendor for that or dedicate staff time to it.
And if I could just, on this, I'll return the floor back to you, but just to clarify, this was, and I'm looking at maybe even Steve, this was approved already by the council and it's part of the budget to go into the general fund.
No,
Right.
Okay, I couldn't remember where it was going to go, and apparently Alderman Schmidt couldn't either. Is this in line with Normal's? Do they have a fee?
Normal does not currently charge a fee.
Okay. Is the data collected similar to what Normal collects?
Yes, the town of Normal has a form that they mail out to businesses on an annual basis to have them renew. I believe it's a paper-based form. You can write on it with an ink pen, mail it back, type of a form.
And is there information that maybe we're not collecting that might be valuable for EDC to have, that have you talked to EDC?
Yes, yeah. We've looked at established programs in another number of communities. I've seen examples where certain communities will definitely leverage it for specific economic development purposes. They'll put in a little flyer in the annual renewal and say, tell us how your business is going. Is your business growing? Are you thinking of hiring more? Are you looking to expand? So there's a lot of opportunity that once you collect that contact information initially, over the years you can ask new and different questions. Those can potentially be optional questions. I've seen communities institute that. They say, these are the required. We really need this information, again, for safety purposes. But these other questions we would invite you to respond to.
But have we talked to EDC already in developing the
Yes.
the form?
Yes.
Okay, and was there information that they wanted that we're able to give them from that?
Yeah, they would enjoy having the master list of employers and businesses to see if there's any that they're not currently aware of.
Okay, I'm still not getting, so, okay.
Okay. In the order that I've seen, we'll just go around the dais here then. Alderman Matthey, Burgess, and then Painter.
Thank you. So my first question is regarding to what's generally referred to as passive income businesses. So if I own an old house that I've cut up into 2 apartments and made it a duplex in there, technically I'm filing business taxes on that because I'm running it as a business. Am I registering a business with the city in that regard? and the coupling on that on the commercial side is if a lot of businesses in town, they have two separate corporations. One owns the property and a separate one owns the actual business that's running inside the property. So am I registering twice in that instance, or am I registering once? Because again, that LLC technically owns the property and files business tax return on that property. So, and I couldn't read in the ordinance to see that was addressed at all.
Right. Well, in the definition of physical location, we basically try to define that if it's a location where a business is being conducted, then that needs to be registered. So in the example you provided where a residential apartment building has 4 units, if there's no business being conducted there, then there would be no registration needed for that. Now, if on the ground floor there was the landlord's office where they were inviting the public in to learn about opportunities for apartments for rent, either in that building or in other buildings across the community, that would be then the landlord's, leasing office. That's a physical location of a business. That would need to be registered. But if it were just a building of apartments only and there's no business taking place there, then that would not need to be registered.
Okay. Okay. Thank you for clarifying that, because my concern was the act of there being a tenants in those apartments is doing business right there. So thank you for clarifying that. One of the other questions that I had reading through this was there was a separate place where it said for each location. So if we have businesses that have multiple locations across town, is it one registration for their entire entity? Is it one per physical location they have?
It would be one per physical location. So if you have a fast food franchise group that owns 5 retail units in 5 different locations, each of those constitutes a physical location. So that each 5 would need to be registered, and there would need to be a separate fee for each of those. The reasoning for that is because you could have different landlords or different property owner contact information for each of those. So we'd want to be sure that we collect that, even if the business owner information would be the same across all 5 or so locations. Again, you could have different property owner contacts. The other issue is that you, from a technical standpoint, could get pretty tricky with establishing parent-child relationships between the main primary account and the sub-accounts, and if in the event, the franchisee sells off 3 of them to some other entity, then when it comes time for renewal, if we just charge one fee for all of them, then we wouldn't necessarily know that we should now charge a different fee for some of them because they've been sold. So it would get quite a bit more technically complicated and more burdensome for staff to administer if we tried to do, a situation like that.
Okay. Thank you. I also, I guess I have a large concern as well about getting the word out on this. I was, we were going to send out notices to all the businesses that we already know about, but at the same time we talk about all the home-based businesses that we don't know about. And so then, it talks about putting an insert in the water bill. Well, I've had my water bill automated using the city's website for 3 years, and I haven't seen an insert ever because they don't come through when you pay online with the automated process. So I guess I just have some concerns as how we're going to find these businesses, and somebody who doesn't see articles with the media or something of that nature, I would hate to see somebody get penalized for a program that they didn't even know that it existed. So I have concerns around that. Ultimately, though, my biggest concern is still that, unlike our next agenda item deals with all issues where people have created a business and they are coming to us and saying, these are things that I need to do in order for my business to function. This agenda item is, to me, us going out and telling people, you must do this thing that we want you to do, mostly for our reasons, and by the way, we want you to pay for it. And so I will be voting no to this particular agenda item again. Thank you.
Alderwoman Burgess and Painter.
I also had a question about notice, because I think in some instances it may be difficult, and people may be inadvertently violating this if we pass it, not because of any lack of due diligence on their part, but because it's hard sometimes to disseminate information. So I wanted to have a question about the penalty section and whether that applies in a situation where someone is not aware, because the way I read it, and I'm not sure this is correct, that penalties would only accrue after notice has been given that they're in violation. Is that accurate? Or will penalties potentially accrue even if they aren't aware that they're not in compliance? And this may be a Jeff question, I don't know.
I believe we would definitely make a business aware through a notice, and then they could have the opportunity to register and come into compliance.
Yeah, absolutely. Our practice would be to let them know and give them an opportunity to register before we would start trying to enact a penalty or something like that.
Okay, so the letter is going to say, hey, you're not registered and you need to be, please do so within this time frame,
Please
as opposed
register
to you're
within
not
30
registered,
days.
here's a $1,000 fine.
That's absolutely right.
Okay, thank you.
Alderwoman Painter.
Thank you. I'd like to speak to Jamie's concern as well. How long have we been working on the one-stop shop?
The project review group one-stop shop meeting, I believe, has been in place for a little over 2 years.
Okay. Is it all wrapped up? Are we all ready to go?
The project review group is an ongoing weekly meeting that's held every Wednesday. We encourage developers to pre-schedule appointments so they can have privacy when they come in and meet with staff, so that way they can present their project to staff and get quick and early and often feedback about what it is that they're proposing, whether it's a land development, a property redevelopment, acquisition of multiple properties and wondering how to interact with the city. There's representatives from the city's water department, building official, planning and zoning, parks department. So it's a great ongoing program to really provide better customer service.
Okay, because I know several small businesses that have tried to open here recently, and they've had big problems. And it doesn't seem to be working the way that I had envisioned it would. I was thinking something along the lines of we would have something on our website that would tell different businesses all the different kinds of licensing fees and regulations that they would have to abide by, and how, allow them to pay for them from the comfort of their own home. Are you working towards that?
We already have and have had for a number of months a guide to doing business, guide to starting a business in Bloomington document. It's available under the economic development section of the city's website. But as we mentioned, the city does not currently have the ability to accept online payments for the different various licenses, like a liquor license or different permits and things like that. So that would be something that we would hope that we could leverage through the starting of this program.
Yeah, fillable forms too, so that they wouldn't have to throw it into PDF and do things like that.
Right.
So the money from the $50 registration fee would go towards that. Is that correct?
Towards improving processes to be more business friendly?
That would be what the goal would be?
That would be part of the goal, yes.
Because we're going to have to convince these people that they're getting something for their money. And to me, I think if we could roll out the fee in lockstep with that sort of, business registration convenience, I think that would be a really good thing. That would make the rollout for this easier. And since it's been worked on for over 2 years, I would hope we're about ready to wrap that up.
Well, the project review group, the one-stop shop, is completely separate from this business registration program and online fees. It's really an opportunity for business owners, developers to come in and sit down and meet face-to-face with staff to flesh out the details of their proposed projects.
Okay, so they can't do that online. There's no way they can do that online.
We encourage them to send us conceptual plans ahead of the meeting that we can review so the meeting is more productive. But really often a lot of the nuances involved in site development, real estate development. I think it's probably going to be one of the last things to be robot and computer automated. Each site is unique. So.
Okay, well, I mean, that is what needs to be told to people, that they're getting something for their money. And I would hope that the process would improve because I've heard several complaints about it. So anyway, I think I'm for this because I can't believe we haven't had business registration for all this time. I mean, wow, just wow. And it will cost money to implement it. But I want to make sure that the people know what they're getting for their money, and I want to make sure that the money is going to the people that are going to be implementing this. So, thank you.
Thank you, Alderwoman Painter. Alderman Black.
Thank you, and thank you, Austin and staff, for putting all this together. I know when we talked about this at a conceptual level a number of months ago, it was kind of 30,000 foot, and now we're kind of seeing the nuts and bolts. Nonetheless, I remain totally unconvinced that this is a staff-driven initiative that we need to be doing. I think we should be taking things off of staff's plate, and this is in addition to the current work that we're doing, so I will be voting no on this.
Okay. At this point, yes.
Just real quick, Mayor, just a component of this is how excited we are as staff on the online registration. And Scott Sprouse, our IS director, there's trailing opportunities, other opportunities that will follow with this component that we're implementing. Just wanted to share that real quick.
Great. Thank you very much. Alderman Milwamwe?
Sure, thank you. And I want to emphasize that I think it's what I'm seeing is a theme that we're trying to use more online processes and really trying to move into the 21st century, which is a good thing. I also generally had a concern, anytime you put something in place like this, I'm always concerned about compliance, how are we going to ensure that people comply? So I'm hoping that one, the notification will help us do that, inform people that yes, we do have this program in place, and I'm assuming that it's going to happen fairly frequently, right? Because as new businesses come online, you never know. So we have to find that those businesses are operating. So I hope that they will have more frequent notification for them to be able to be compliant. So I also understand the safety aspect of it. That's the part that convinced me. I'm never a big fan of additional fees, but I think the safety aspect of it is what convinced me. I think it's a pretty good thing that we're doing. Thank you.
Alderman Sage.
Yeah, thanks, Mboka, because I was going to highlight that point exactly. I mean, I appreciate a couple things I saw happen after the conversation with the council. We went back and I think addressed what was a concern for me was this kind of ongoing fee collection. And that change has been made to make this a one-time registration fee. I like the principle of saying that you don't have to pay any more unless we know that you're intentionally not complying, and then there'll be some fees associated with that or some fines. But to Mboka's point, recalling the conversation we had about this a while back, and for me it was this issue of related to the safeguarding of our first responders and going into those situations, both police and fire, that I think it's a worthy fee, and I'm not one to be in favor just arbitrarily of fees. I don't think any of us are, but that particular issue I think is important for our first responders to be able to have some information at their fingertips before even they get to location, but maybe certainly after they get there as well. So thank you.
Okay. All right, at this point, is there a motion on the floor? Alderwoman Howman.
I'll make the motion that the ordinance amending Chapter 11 of the Bloomington City Code to establish a business registration program be approved.
Okay, is there a second to that motion?
I'll second.
Second by Alderman Milwamwe. At this point, if everyone will go ahead and vote. The motion carries 6-2. There are 2 nays to announce, Madam Clerk.
Alderman Mathy and Alderman Black.
Okay. Thank you very much. The next and our last item on our regular agenda is consideration of an ordinance adopting a schedule of fees for the city and amending various chapters within the city code regarding fees as requested by the city manager. And I'm going to go ahead and turn this over to our city manager. And we have about approximately a 20-minute presentation and approximately a 20-minute council discussion. Mr. Gleason.
Thank you, Mayor. This also is a product of the March 2018 council meeting that directed staff to look into this and bring a final product. The fees are not the enterprise fund fees that we have. Bob Mart is going to make a quick presentation and then open this up to question or comments from council and then hopefully approve the staff recommendation. Bob?
Well, thank you, Mayor and City Council and City Manager Gleason. I'd also like to acknowledge Assistant City Manager Rasmussen. I think he gave city staff the nudge we needed to finally look at codes that have not, or fees that we have not addressed since the early 70s. So I think that's important that we had that opportunity, we got that support to move forward on those fee adjustments. I was not on the staff during the big picture discussions, but was asked to assist with the coordination of the schedule of fees project since since it was assumed that the Community Development Department had most of the fees to be revised. Back in March of 2018, during discussions for the fiscal year 2019 budget, the City Council directed staff to study and revise the various fees detailed in the City Code. While the City Administration had previously contracted for the service cost study in the fall of 2015, it does not appear that study was ever implemented. The most recent fee adjustments were made in 2016 to the liquor licenses and for the rental inspection program. Zoning, building, and signage were addressed in 2012, and all other fees had not been adjusted since prior to 2006, and many of those go back to the 70s. So there is a need for what we're calling a schedule of fees that you'll see in many municipalities throughout the state. And right now we have a wide range of fees collected by multiple departments and divisions throughout the city. Fees are scattered throughout the 45 chapters of the municipal code. And if you ever seen our municipal code, it's 3 actually volumes of 4-inch books. And it's very massive. So can you imagine a staff member, even a developer, trying to determine what their fees are based on leafing through that entire book to find out what their project will cost them. We also have an outdated fee structure in comparison to other similar-sized communities, and we have a historically inconsistent approach to adjustment of fees over time. So you might have a request by one department saying, I want to adjust my fees, but it wasn't a comprehensive effort to really look at all the fees throughout all the city departments. We also, this is a standard format from throughout the state. These are the types of city fees we have right now. There are codified fees within the municipal code, and those do require city council approval. Those include building permits, liquor licenses, emergency medical service fees, and they would also include our enterprise zone fees, but we did not specifically include that in this round of the schedule of fees. And I want to make sure you understand that part of it. Also, we have some non-codified fees, and that's usually at the departmental discretion and our program base. And you might see that in the parks program for the recreation program fees, the pavilion rental fees, and even the fire department has false alarm service policies that are currently not codified but are part of their working policy on dealing with false alarms. So there's 2 ways that we have our municipal code looks at addressing our existing fees. One is the automatic adjustment of fees, and that's automatic per the municipal code. But even that's showing some flaws. So under our city annexation, I'm going to call that your development impact fee per lot. That's based on the consumer price index for that year. And so we're having to go back in every year and calculate the increase from when that program was adopted in 2003. So we're consistently having to go back into that cycle of applying a consumer price index onto a fee to raise that fee annually every year. The emergency medical services fees that Brian works with every day, those are adjusted by the municipal code by a 3% standard. So right now we have two different ways we're adjusting those fees. And then the liquor license fees that were adjusted back in 2016, those were sequentially increased as part of the code revision back in 2016. So you're going to see the fees for 2017, 2018, 2019, and it's eaten up more space in the municipal code, but it shows that progression of fee increases over time. And I think at least we took that step to show that those fees were ever increasing, but we could have maybe done it a different way as far as we look at these adjusting our automatic fees. The ones we're dealing with mostly today are fixed rate fees, and those do come in as a departmental request with city council approval. So again, that would be the building permits, excavation permits through the Public Works Engineering Division, and nursing homes and nurseries that are handled through our city clerk's office. So we're looking at a proposed fee schedule ordinance, and that ordinance allows, the way it was originally structured back in our meeting in March, was that we're looking at an ordinance that allows for up to a 5% biannual adjustment. We'd have a phased approach to the fee adjustment starting in May of 2021, and the fees adjusted based upon departmental need and cost increases. Also, the City Council may amend the schedule of fees by approval of an ordinance from time to time. So if you see that the fee just seems out of whack because a comparable community has a different fee, and that would give you the opportunity during that budget review process to say, I think we're going to skip the 2-year biannual fee and look at this on an annual basis for not all fees, but maybe a certain number of fees that could be adjusted when we look at that schedule of fees. So under the current review process, we conducted a comprehensive review of the entire municipal code to locate all fees within the 45 separate chapters to develop the schedule of fees. The schedule of fees includes approximately 350 separate fees, and roughly 100 of those were actually adjusted. So many of our fees, even though it's been shown on the schedule of fee listing, if we're able to refer to the comparable chart in your ordinance, you'll see that many of those fees were actually not adjusted. We maintained the existing standard, but we went department by department asking what those fees should be over time, and we did this one-time adjustment. What we discovered was that there are several fees that are codified but no longer administered by the city. So we have a code developed in 1981, and that's for the payment for the city attorney if they were serving on a trial case. For one day they were to receive $25. We're striking that from the code because it'd be very difficult to find an attorney that would work for $25 a day. I don't know if they even worked that way in 1981, but it seems pretty cheap even then. We also have some outdated codes that reflect back to our time in 1974, and that deals with night scavengers. We have a whole chapter on scavengers. So the day scavengers are those folks that are wandering around with wagons picking up appliances throughout our community, and those are to be licensed. And we also have night scavengers that probably came from the turn of the century on those people that come back at the nighttime and clean out your privies. So that's also supposed to be licensed, but you have these outdated codes, and until you do a comprehensive review of the entire code, you're never going to find these hidden away in different chapters. The other one that we have is this, in the codified version, showed the original cost, but not the CPI. So if I'm going in and I'm saying, what's it going to cost me on my impact fees to purchase this lot in this new subdivision, knowing that you have an annexation impact fee on that lot. So back in 2003, that standard was $540, but in 2018, because of that consumer price index increase over time, that annexation impact fee is now $737. So that old fee is still reflected in the code. And I think what this does for us when looking at having a schedule of fees is that we can annually update this or biannually adopt this and work with our city clerk's office to make sure that information gets out annually. I think the intent was to more appropriately align the fees with the true cost of services for this program. So I kind of want to go over the one-time adjustment of fees. So this is some examples of how we're looking at these fees, and you'll see this better reflected in the comparable chart. But just to give you a feel for, the annual license fee for billiards and pool tables processed through the city clerk is requested to go from $18 per table to $20 per table, and that's an 11% increase. And this fee was probably established back in the mid-'70s, I would assume. The annual license fee for each machine, and this refers to, I guess, they don't call them jukeboxes anymore, but this is what a jukebox is in a tavern or something like that. And the fee here is requested to go from $36 to $38, and that's a 5.5 increase. This is a community development fee for a plumbing fee, a bathtub with or without a shower in the community development, going from $13, which is a current residential rate, to $15, which represents a 15% increase in that plumbing fee. Now, I would like to tell you this. There's two scales on the plumbing permits within the Community Development Department. We have a commercial fee, which is the higher of the two fees, and the residential fee. So our current residential fee is $13 for a fixture, whether that's a faucet or a toilet or something like that. And so that fee is $13 for the residential user and $15 for the commercial user. And so you can imagine when we're trying to process these applications that are coming through fast through our support staff, they've got to figure out, was it a commercial job or residential job? Which fee schedule should I jump to? And so what we're recommending in this case is an increase that represents tying those two prices, those two plumbing permit costs, to the same. So we're working off of one schedule in our office. So both the commercial property owner would be paid $15, as would the residential property owner. So what you're seeing is an increase on the residential side for this fee, but the commercial fee stays the same. And that's more to bring it in line for efficiency of the division. Sign permit fees less than $1,000. We're asking that fee go from $14 as the base fee to $15, and that's a 7% increase. Public sidewalk construction, this is through Public Works and Engineering. The fee right now is $35, and we're asking that to go to $40. And the Abraham Lincoln Memorial Garage, the daily maximum fee from Facilities Department is existing $7 and the potential to go up to $10 for that fee. I will say this, that if you look at the consumer price index, the average consumer price index over the last 10 years, it's averaging about 1.9% per year. And some of these fees, primarily through the Community Development Department, we're looking at that 7%. But we had adopted those fee increases back in 2012. Many of these other departments had not adjusted their fees forever. And so I think it's important. You might see a spike in some of these fees, but it's only because some of these fees have not been adjusted or addressed over time. We asked about how do we compare ourselves with other communities, and I'll be honest with you, this is very difficult because each community has their own needs and their own sources of revenue different from another community. So I struggled to find fees that are comparable between both the town of Normal and the city of Bloomington. So the first one is the false alarm fee that is administered through our fire department. So under our current proposal, we're asking that the false alarm fees, the first 3 are free to kind of get that property owner. It's like, okay, something went wrong, we're there, and Brian can probably talk a little bit more about that. But after the 4th and 5th, you're charged a $75 fee. After the 6th and 7th, you're charged a $100 fee. After the 8th and 9th, you're charged $200, and it's incrementally more stringent on those fees. But if you apply the fee that the town of Normal has at $75 per fee, if you took your full 10, I think town of Normal, if somebody had 10 false alarms, they're paying roughly $675, and with the city of Bloomington under this proposal, they'd be at $1050. So it's a little bit more stringent. I will say this, the town of Normal has a license fee for towing companies. We do not. The town of Normal has a terminal fee for video gaming. We do not. The next comparable one is on junk dealers. We charge a $100 annual fee. They charge a $50 annual fee. So there's not really the apples and oranges. The only way we really tried to get hit the mark on some of these is like on the planning and zoning kind of issues. And so our permit fee, we're requesting to raise it to the $300 upon approval of the zoning ordinance update. So when a fee is within the zoning ordinance, we have to hold appropriate public hearings in order to get that approved. And so we're recommending that that fee go up after we do the zoning ordinance update. As far as our contractor registration, right now it's $75. We're asking that to go up to $100, and you'll see that the comparable fee in the town of Normal is $50. Our public sidewalk construction permit is $40 in the for the city of Bloomington, and it's $10 for single-family residential and $15 for all others. And then I threw out this other one that matched. And I don't know that either town has any of these uses, but you got to have a use of that. You got to have it in your code. So I think that what's important is I don't know how often the town of Normal has updated their codes. When I look back at some of these, they may be just as outdated as we are in upping some of these or adjusting some of their fees. So some of the benefits for the city of Bloomington is future revenues to support our existing programs, ease of access for citizen developers for fee information. And I think what I'd like to, Johnny, you had made a reference to our one-stop shop. And I think the most important thing is that the developers need to know the cost, the true cost of their development. And if I told them, well, if they came in and said, what is it going to cost me to develop in your community? Right now, I'm going to have to pretty much send them to the multiple departments or get them in the same room, the PRG meeting room, to kind of go over their costs. Or they're looking online chapter after chapter after chapter to find out, well, I need to get a rezoning, then I need to get a building permit, then I need to get a driveway permit, then I need to get all these other things, then my sign permit, and register my business through the clerk of the finance department. They don't know where these things are at, and it's very difficult to assist them when they may not come in or they're looking through the code. What the schedule of fees does, it watered down 45 chapters of the municipal code into 25 pages. And now what we can do is if you came in and you're a restaurateur, I can go through here and start highlighting, hey, you're going to have 2 handicap accessible restrooms, you're going to have 2 fixtures per each bathroom, boom, boom. You're going to put in $1.2 million building. Your building permit fee is going to be this. You're going through everything else in your kitchen, your fire suppression systems, your signage. We can start just highlighting what these people are going to be dealing with on our permits, hand them this, and they're walking out the door with one of their financiers to find out how they can move this project forward. And so that's a lot different than what we had before of, hey, here's 45 chapters, do your best. And even staff doesn't know where most of these fees are hidden, to let somebody know. And there's one thing that I don't like about development is peeling an onion. Oh, you forgot about that. Oh, what about this? That's not how we operate in our department. These people need to know exactly what they need to move their project forward, and this is a good first step for the city to look at. So I'd be happy to answer any questions. I'm most familiar with the community development side. I got a good handle on some of the other departments, but I can certainly try to answer any
Questions of Mr. Martyr or any of our chiefs? Okay. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Thank you, chiefs and staff and Mr. Gleason for all the work that you put into this. Is there a motion? And it doesn't end discussion. I'll ask for.
I'll make the motion to put it into play that we consider the ordinance adopting a schedule of fees
Okay.
as presented.
Moved by Alderwoman Hellman. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Second by Alderwoman Bray. Any further discussion, questions? Okay. If everyone will vote. The motion carries 7-1. There's one nay to announce, Madam Clerk.
Alderman Sage.
Okay. Thank you very much. At this point, I will turn it over to our city manager for city manager discussion.
Thank you, Mayor. Scott, do we have the schedule of events? Here we go. Upcoming events here in the city. And then also just announce very quickly on the committee of the whole next week on Monday night. We're going to have a quick presentation from Jay Tetzloff on the O'Neill Park and pool. Also, there'll be a library presentation, just a quick update from Jeannie that shows where they've been with a Farnsworth update since the last time they presented to council. And then I'm going to do a quick 3-month city manager update on some things that will be implemented here in very short order. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay. Thank you very much. And I just wanted to publicly acknowledge for the council that as of tomorrow, our liquor commission meeting for October, we will have, Jack Batel, who has been on the liquor commission, has resigned, and I'm replacing him, bringing back Mr. Jordan, Jim Jordan, who has been on the liquor commission in the past. So, and I think Alderwoman Howman knows this, but I meant to mention this in our last exciting episode, and I apologize. And I also would like to lament the passing of one of our great local artists, Harold Greger. Other than that, that's all I have, and I will start over here with Alderman Mellowamboy.
Oh, I just wanted to make a note that we've been receiving a number of emails from Lane Cannon, the manager of the arena, about some what I think are pretty exciting shows. And I know none of the artists, but it looks exciting.
Okay.
That's all.
Thank you. Alderman Sage.
So not to look for you in a mosh pit over there in a concert for some of those maybe, right? Jeff, I just wanted to say to Jeff, and I know Jeff, there was a tremendous amount of other staff involved with the dock ordinance, but that was really excellent work. And I know Bob was involved. I know there were a number of staff people. That was a very time-consuming effort, and so I just wanted to publicly acknowledge that, because and I know we all appreciate that. I'm not the only one that realizes that, but I did want to say thank you. The other thing is, did we dim the lights or something during the?
It's dark. It seems darker in
Yeah, I thought maybe I had a rapidly accelerating cataract or something over here, man, because I wasn't sure. The more I sat here, it just seemed to get darker, and so do we have like some control or something where we can bring that back up? Is there something behind Scott over there, or?
Scott's looking.
So, all right, okay.
He's got the light over there, or we can go over there.
All right, thanks. I just wanted to clarify that.
Alderman Matthey and then Howman.
Alderman Sage took a lot of exactly what I was going to say. Everybody's been doing that all night tonight about the docks. I know it was a tremendous amount of work, and thank you to everybody who worked on that. I also wanted to just let you know that I will not be in attendance next Monday. I will be on an airplane on my way to a conference, so you guys have fun without me.
Okay. We will. Thank you. Alderwoman Howman, excuse me.
That's fine. I don't see the firefighters memorial dedication up here. Did I miss that?
It should be. It's this Saturday at 11 o'clock.
Yeah. I just want to make sure that Chief Moore got his due here for that. Yeah. On a personal note, this is October, I think, if I remember. It's Breast Cancer Awareness Month. If you got them, take care of them.
Okay, on that note, is there a motion to adjourn? Thank you. Actually, not to trivialize the lost a mother and a grandmother to breast cancer, but is there a motion to adjourn? Moved by Alderman Black. Is there a second? Second by Alderwoman Bray. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. We're adjourned. Thank you.